The conference room smelled like stale coffee and expensive perfume. I sat in my usual chair, third from the left, watching Rebecca Chen lean over my husband's desk for the fourth time that week. Her hand lingered on his shoulder just a second too long. My name is Catherine Morrison, and I'm a senior project manager at Redstone Analytics in downtown Chicago. I've been married to Daniel for 8 years, and for the past 6 months, I've watched a woman half my age systematically try to dismantle everything I've built. Most people would have caused a scene, confronted her in the break room, maybe even gone to HR. But I didn't get to where I am by being reactive. I got here by being strategic. And sometimes, the most powerful move is the one nobody sees coming. Before we continue, wherever you're watching from around the world, drop your location in the comments below. And if you believe in karma served ice cold, hit that subscribe button because this story is about to take a turn that'll have you questioning everything you thought you knew about patience and revenge. It started innocuously enough. Rebecca joined our department in March, fresh out of Northwestern with her MBA and enough ambition to power the entire Willis Tower. She was 26, striking in that effortless way that comes from never having worried about anything substantial. And she had her sights set on exactly 2 things: the assistant director position opening up in September and my husband. I noticed the coffee runs first. Daniel mentioned casually over dinner one Tuesday that the new hire had offered to grab his usual from the Starbucks on Wacker. "Thoughtful kid," he'd said, not looking up from his phone. Remembered I take it black with 2 sugars. By April, she'd learned his lunch preferences. Daniel started coming home with stories about Rebecca's insights during meetings, her fresh perspective on client acquisition, her innovative approach to data visualization. I'd smile, nod, ask follow-up questions like the supportive wife I'd always been. Inside, I was cataloging every detail. The thing about working in corporate analytics is you learn to read patterns that others miss. You develop an eye for anomalies, for data points that don't quite fit the expected model. Rebecca's behavior was textbook home wrecking 101, but with a professional veneer that made it deniable. Strategic touches during presentations, emails sent at 9 p.m. about urgent matters that could have waited until morning. Lunch invitations framed as networking opportunities. I started keeping a file, not a physical one. I'm not foolish enough to leave evidence lying around. But mentally, I noted every interaction, every boundary crossed, every manipulation disguised as professional development. My colleague, Jennifer, noticed it too. We'd worked together for 5 years, survived 3 corporate restructures, and countless office politics battles. 1. Afternoon in May, she pulled me aside in the women's restroom on the 14th floor. "Kat, I don't want to overstep, but Rebecca's behavior with Daniel is getting inappropriate. Have you noticed?" I refreshed my lipstick in the mirror, keeping my expression neutral. "I've noticed. And you're just letting it happen?" "I'm documenting it," I corrected. "There's a difference." Jennifer looked at me like I'd grown a second head, but she didn't push further. She knew me well enough to understand that when I went quiet, I was planning something. The promotion announcement was scheduled for September 15th. Our VP, Marcus Rodriguez, had made it clear that the assistant director role would go to someone who demonstrated not just technical competence, but leadership, integrity, and what he called organizational alignment. The position came with a 40% salary increase, direct reports, and a seat at the executive table during quarterly strategy sessions. Rebecca wanted it, desperately. I could see it in the way she volunteered for every high-visibility project, stayed late to perfect presentations that were already flawless, and positioned herself strategically in Marcus's line of sight during all-hands meetings. She was good at her job, I'll give her that. Her analytical skills were sharp, her client presentations polished, and her technical knowledge solid for someone with only 3 years of industry experience. But she had a fatal flaw. She underestimated me. Throughout June and July, while Rebecca was busy making sure Daniel noticed her new designer outfits and strategically timed water cooler conversations, I was building my case. Not against her professional capabilities, that would have been petty and ineffective, No, I was documenting something far more valuable, a pattern of ethical violations so subtle that individually they seemed meaningless, but collectively they painted a picture of someone who couldn't be trusted with organizational leadership. The first instance I captured was in mid-June. Rebecca had submitted a client proposal for the Thornton Industries account, a mid-size manufacturing firm worth approximately $2 million in annual revenue. Her analysis was brilliant, her recommendations sound, but there was one problem. The methodology section contained proprietary frameworks from our competitor, Stratton and Associates. I recognized it immediately because I'd seen their pitch deck when we'd partnered with them on the Midwest Retail Coalition project 2 years prior. I didn't report it. Not yet. Instead, I made a detailed notation, including timestamps and document version histories that our IT system automatically logged. The second instance came in July. Rebecca had been assigned to mentor 2 junior analysts, Priya Sharma and Marcus Chen. Yes, relation to Rebecca, which should have disqualified her from the mentorship role, but somehow didn't. During a casual conversation in the break room, Priya mentioned to me that Rebecca had encouraged her to access client files she didn't have clearance for, framing it as initiative and going above and beyond. She said that's how people get noticed around here, Priya had said, clearly uncomfortable. Is that true, Mrs. Morrison? Absolutely not, I told her firmly. That's a HIPAA violation and grounds for immediate termination. Did you access those files? Priya shook her head quickly. No, I felt weird about it, but I didn't want to seem like I wasn't a team player. You did exactly the right thing. If anyone pressures you to violate policy again, you come directly to me. Understood? I documented that conversation too. With Priya's permission, I had her send me an email summarizing what Rebecca had told her, time-stamped and preserved. Meanwhile, Rebecca's pursuit of Daniel escalated. In August, she started suggesting after-work drinks to celebrate project milestones. Daniel would come home smelling like the bourbon from Miller's, pub telling me about Rebecca's boyfriend troubles or her family drama with her parents in San Francisco. She was building intimacy through vulnerability, a classic manipulation tactic. I never confronted Daniel, never accused him of anything, because honestly, my husband was being faithful, oblivious, but faithful. He genuinely believed Rebecca saw him as a mentor, nothing more. Men can be remarkably dense about these things, especially when someone is skilled at maintaining plausible deniability. But Rebecca had made a critical miscalculation. She assumed that because I wasn't making a scene, I was either unaware or too weak to act. She thought my silence meant consent, or worse, defeat. The night of August 23rd, Daniel came home from one of these networking drinks and mentioned casually that Rebecca had asked him to put in a good word with Marcus about her promotion candidacy. What did you tell her? I asked, setting down my book. I said I'd think about it, he replied, loosening his tie. I mean, she's talented, driven, could probably do the job. Could she? I let the question hang in the air. Have you reviewed her work comprehensively, beyond the surface-level presentations? Daniel paused, clearly not having considered this. Well, I've seen her client decks. They're solid. I went back to my book, but I could feel him watching me. You don't think she should get it? I didn't say that. I just think it's worth doing thorough due diligence before endorsing someone for a leadership role, especially someone who's only been with the company for 6 months. He nodded slowly, and I could practically see the gears turning. Daniel might be oblivious to Rebecca's personal agenda, but he was nobody's fool when it came to professional judgment. September arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes Chicago feel alive. The promotion decision was scheduled to be announced on the 15th, a Friday, during our monthly all-hands meeting. Rebecca spent the first 2 weeks of September in overdrive, making sure every project she touched was visible, every client interaction documented, every win attributed clearly to her contributions. I spent those 2 weeks doing something different. I compiled my documentation into a comprehensive report, cross-referenced with company policy violations, industry standards, and ethical guidelines from our professional association. I included the plagiarized methodology from the Thornton proposal, the inappropriate mentorship advice to junior staff, and, this was the piece I'd been waiting to deploy, evidence of Rebecca accessing confidential personnel files. That last one I'd discovered almost by accident. Our IT department sends weekly access logs to department heads, and as a senior project manager with administrative privileges, I received copies. In early September, I noticed that Rebecca had accessed salary information for multiple employees, including Daniel and myself. When I cross-referenced the access times with her calendar, every single instance occurred outside of business hours, and none of them were related to any project she was assigned to. Accessing personnel files without business justification is a terminable offense at Redstone. It's in the Employee Handbook, page 47, section 3.2. I should know. I helped revise that handbook 3 years ago. On September 12th, 3 days before the announcement, I requested a private meeting with Marcus Rodriguez. His assistant, Linda, scheduled me for 2 p.m. that Wednesday in his corner office on the 16th floor. Marcus was a fair man, which is why I respected him. He'd risen through the ranks at Redstone over 15 years, surviving multiple ownership changes and industry downturns by being both politically savvy and genuinely committed to ethical operations. He was in his late 40s, with gray touching his temples and reading glasses he wore on a chain around his neck, habit his daughter had apparently talked him into. "Catherine," he greeted me, gesturing to the chair across from his mahogany desk. "Linda said you wanted to discuss something sensitive?" "I do." I placed a tablet on his desk, cued to the first page of my documentation. "I have concerns about Rebecca Chen's candidacy for the assistant director position." Marcus's expression remained neutral, but I saw his attention sharpen. "I'm listening." For the next 45 minutes, I walked him through everything. I was careful to keep my tone professional, my presentation fact-based, my evidence irrefutable. I showed him the plagiarized methodology with side-by-side comparisons. I showed him the email from Priya documenting the inappropriate mentorship advice. And finally, I showed him the IT access logs, highlighted and annotated. "These personnel file accesses," Marcus said slowly, studying the logs, "they're all after hours." "Yes, and none of them correspond to any active project." "Requiring that information. Do you know what she was looking for?" "Salary information would be my guess, possibly to use as leverage in her own compensation negotiations, possibly to identify perceived rivals and their compensation structures." Marcus leaned back in his chair, removing his glasses to rub his eyes. "This is thoroughly documented, Catherine. How long have you been tracking this?" "Since I first noticed irregularities in June. I wanted to be certain I wasn't seeing patterns that didn't exist. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. And the personal dimension?" His eyes met mine directly. "I've heard rumors about Rebecca's behavior toward Daniel." So he had noticed. "The personal dimension is irrelevant to my professional assessment," I said calmly. "These violations would concern me regardless of who committed them. The fact that the person happens to be pursuing my husband just made me more vigilant about ensuring I had irrefutable evidence before bringing this to your attention." Marcus actually smiled at that. "You know what I appreciate about you, Catherine? You never let emotion cloud your judgment. Some people in your position would have come in here guns blazing, making accusations they couldn't prove. You built a legal case." "I learned from the best," I said, referencing Marcus's own legendary thoroughness. He tapped his fingers on the desk, thinking. "You understand that if I act on this, Rebecca will likely be terminated, not just passed over for the promotion?" "I understand, and I'm prepared to testify to every piece of evidence I've presented if there's any challenge." "There won't be." Marcus closed the tablet, decision made. I'll need to involve HR and legal, but based on what you've shown me, Rebecca Chen's employment at Redstone Analytics will be terminated effective immediately for policy violations. The personnel file access alone is grounds for dismissal. And the promotion? Marcus looked at me over his glasses. Catherine, you've been acting as an informal assistant director for the past 2 years anyway. Everyone in leadership knows it. The only reason you weren't the automatic choice is because you never formally applied. My heart skipped. I didn't realize the position required a formal application. It doesn't. Consider this your official offer. 40% salary increase, reporting directly to me and effective immediately. We'll announce it Friday as planned. Friday, September 15th, dawned gray and drizzly, typical Chicago autumn weather. The all-hands meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the large conference room that could accommodate all 67 members of our department. I arrived early, took my usual seat, and watched as people filtered in, clutching coffee cups and looking variously eager or resigned, depending on how much they thought this meeting would affect them. Rebecca arrived at 9:58, wearing a cream-colored designer suit I recognized from the Nordstrom window on Michigan Avenue. She'd clearly dressed for victory, expecting Marcus to announce her promotion. She caught my eye as she entered and gave me a small, almost pitying smile, the kind you'd give someone you're about to surpass. I smiled back. Genuine warmth. No hint of what was coming. Daniel sat 2 rows ahead of me, oblivious as ever. Jennifer was to my left, and she leaned over to whisper, "Did you hear Rebecca was called into HR yesterday afternoon?" "Was she?" I kept my voice mildly curious. "Yeah, she was in there for over an hour. Came out looking shaken. Won't talk about it." At exactly 10 a.m., Marcus entered with our HR director, Patricia Okonkwo, and the room fell silent. Marcus moved to the front, and Patricia stood slightly behind him. Never a good sign for anyone paying attention to corporate body language. "Good morning, everyone," Marcus began. "I know you're expecting the assistant director announcement, and we'll get to that. But first, I need to address a personnel matter." The energy in the room shifted. People sat up straighter. Rebecca's confident smile faltered slightly. Effective immediately, Rebecca Chen's employment with Redstone Analytics has been terminated for violations of company policy, specifically unauthorized access to confidential personnel records and other ethical breaches. Rebecca, Patricia will escort you to collect your personal belongings. Your final paycheck and benefits information will be mailed to your address on file. The room erupted in murmurs. Rebecca's face went from confident to confused to horrified in the span of seconds. She looked around as if searching for someone to contradict what she'd just heard, her eyes finally landing on Daniel. There must be some mistake," she said, her voice shaking. "Marcus, can we discuss this privately?" "The decision is final," Patricia said firmly, moving toward Rebecca. "Please come with me." As Patricia led a visibly shaking Rebecca from the room, I felt Daniel turn to look at me. I kept my eyes forward, expression neutral, though inside I felt a satisfaction so profound it was almost spiritual. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. This was about consequences, about the universe correcting an imbalance. When the door closed behind them, Marcus continued as if nothing unusual had happened. "Now, for the promotion announcement. The assistant director position will be filled by someone who has demonstrated not just technical excellence, but unwavering integrity, strategic thinking, and a commitment to mentoring the next generation of analysts. Catherine Morrison, please stand." Every eye in the room turned to me. I stood, smoothing my navy dress, and met Marcus's approving gaze. "Catherine has been with Redstone for 7 years," Marcus continued. "She's led 12 major client accounts, maintained a 98% retention rate, and has been instrumental in developing the ethical guidelines we all operate under. She'll be taking on the assistant director role effective immediately. Please join me in congratulating her." The applause was genuine. I'd cultivated good relationships across the department, and most people seemed genuinely pleased. Jennifer grabbed my hand and squeezed it. Daniel's expression was complex, a mixture of pride and dawning realization. After the meeting, people came up to congratulate me. Daniel hung back, waiting until the crowd dispersed. Finally, he approached, and we stood in the emptying conference room. "You knew," he said quietly, "about Rebecca, about all of it." "I documented it," I corrected, echoing what I'd told Jennifer months ago. "Why didn't you tell me? Warn me that she was trying to sleep with you?" I kept my voice level. "Because you're a grown man, Daniel. You're capable of maintaining professional boundaries without your wife running interference. And because I needed to see how you'd handle it." "How I'd handle it," he repeated, something like hurt crossing his face. "You were testing me." "I was trusting you. There's a difference." I picked up my tablet, preparing to leave. "You never crossed any lines that mattered. You were flattered by the attention. What middle-aged man wouldn't be? But you stayed faithful. You came home every night. You never hid anything from me, even when you probably should have known better than to mention some of those conversations." "And Rebecca?" "Rebecca made choices. She chose to pursue a married man. She chose to violate company policy. She chose to cut corners and compromise her integrity for shortcuts to success. I simply made sure those choices had appropriate consequences." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "You're terrifying sometimes, you know that?" "I prefer thorough." I touched his arm lightly. "We have dinner reservations tonight at Gibson's, 7:30. Don't be late. We're celebrating." That evening, while Daniel and I shared a bottle of Cabernet and a leather booth overlooking Rush Street, my phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Heard through the grapevine that Rebecca is trying to claim wrongful termination. Patricia apparently laughed in her face. You don't do anything halfway, do you?" I smiled and put the phone away. Daniel noticed. "What?" "Nothing important, just someone learning that actions have consequences." "Kat," he said, setting down his wine glass, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Always. If Rebecca had actually succeeded, if I had been stupid enough to fall for it, what would you have done?" I considered the question seriously. "That's the thing, Daniel. She never could have succeeded, because I know you. I know what we've built together. And I trusted that even if you were momentarily flattered or tempted, you'd remember what matters. And if you'd been wrong? Then I would have had a different set of documentation and a very good divorce attorney." I said it matter-of-factly and watched his eyes widen slightly. "But I wasn't wrong. You're many things, Daniel Morrison, but you're not a cheater." He reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm sorry, I was so blind to what she was doing. I should have seen it. Probably, but we all have blind spots. The important thing is that when it mattered, you made the right choices." I squeezed his hand. "Now, are you going to order the ribeye or should we split the porterhouse?" In the weeks that followed, I settled into my new role with the same methodical approach I'd applied to everything else. My first act as assistant director was to implement a mandatory ethics training program, with special emphasis on professional boundaries and information security. My second was to revise our mentorship program to include clear guidelines and oversight. Priya Sharma became one of my direct reports, and I made sure she understood that her instinct to question Rebecca's advice had been exactly right. "Trust your gut," I told her during our first one-on-one. "And if something feels off, it probably is. The people who succeed long-term in this industry aren't the ones who take shortcuts. They're the ones who build reputations for integrity." As for Rebecca, I heard through professional networks that she'd landed at a smaller firm in Milwaukee, several steps down from where she'd been at Redstone. Her references from our company were factual but lukewarm, technically accurate but lacking the enthusiasm that opens doors in our industry. She'd effectively plateaued her career at 26, all because she'd mistaken silence for weakness and patience for ignorance. I never contacted her, never gloated, didn't need to. The best revenge isn't dramatic confrontation or public humiliation. It's simply ensuring that people reap what they sow and then moving forward with your own success. 6 months later, at the company holiday party, Marcus pulled me aside near the dessert table. "Catherine, I want you to know that promoting you was the best decision I've made as VP. Your Q4 numbers were exceptional, and I've had 3 clients specifically request you by name for their renewals." "Thank you, Marcus. I appreciate the confidence you've shown in me." He paused, swirling his scotch. "Can I ask you something off the record?" "Of course." "The Rebecca situation. How long were you sitting on that evidence before you came to me?" 3 months. 3 months. He whistled low. "Most people would have acted immediately. Why wait?" "Because immediate action is reactive. Strategic action requires patience. I needed to be absolutely certain that when I presented the case, it was irrefutable, and I needed to see the full pattern of behavior, not just isolated incidents." Marcus smiled. "You're going to run this company someday, Catherine. You know that, right?" I smiled back. "One step at a time, Marcus. One step at a time." As I'm recording this now, 2 years after that promotion announcement, I'm sitting in my new office. Corner view, 18th floor. The assistant director role was just the beginning. Last month, I was appointed VP of Client Relations, making me the youngest VP in Redstone's history, and the first woman to hold that particular position. Daniel and I are stronger than ever. The Rebecca situation forced conversations about boundaries, trust, and what we each needed from our marriage. It wasn't always comfortable, but it was necessary. We go to couples counseling now, not because we're in crisis, but because we learned that maintenance is easier than repair. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that conference room moment when Rebecca's world imploded. I don't feel guilt. I don't feel triumph. I feel a quiet satisfaction in knowing that I handled a difficult situation with precision, professionalism, and patience. The people who underestimated me learned an important lesson. Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. And sometimes, the most devastating move is the one your opponent never sees coming until it's already checkmate. So if you're out there right now, dealing with someone who's testing your boundaries, threatening your relationship, or undermining your success, remember this. You don't always have to react loudly to respond powerfully. Sometimes the most effective response is to stay quiet, build your case, and wait for exactly the right moment to act. Document everything. Trust your instincts. And never ever mistake someone's patience for permission. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because I share these real-life accounts of justice served every single week. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and whether you think I handled this the right way or if you would have done something different. Because at the end of the day, we all have choices. Rebecca chose deception. I chose documentation. And when the moment came, I made sure the truth spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. Thanks for listening to my story. And remember, karma isn't always instant, but she's always accurate. You just have to be patient enough to watch her work.